Kai had never thought diplomacy involved so much tripping. The corridors of Virelia Prime weren't exactly built for humans, or at least for humans with 2 left feet and a propensity to speak before thinking. As he dodged a cluster of hovercarts transporting blinking crates, he stumbled over the edge of a magnetic strip, sending one of the crates tumbling. A mechanical chirp sounded. Then the crate, apparently self-aware, managed to hover midair for a brief moment before bouncing off the wall and splattering a luminous gel across the floor. Kai cursed under his breath and muttered something about gadget hazards while trying to balance on the strip like an acrobat with no training. That was when he saw her. Lyra emerged from a side corridor, moving with a kind of fluid elegance that made Kai wonder whether gravity had a personal bias toward some species. She looked almost human. Tall, smooth skin that reflected the station's artificial lights like faintly polished chrome, hair cascading over her shoulders in waves that seemed almost alive. But her ears, long, delicate, translucent, twitched with every subtle motion, giving away thoughts she probably intended to conceal. She paused, observing him with those golden eyes, and Kai knew instantly that the universe had conspired to embarrass him in the most spectacular fashion possible. Hello," he said, waving awkwardly, which only caused a small service drone nearby to mistake his hand for a greeting and wrap its extendable arms around his wrist. He yelped, jerking back, and the drone emitted an apologetic beep before floating off, leaving him red-faced but still standing. Lyra's expression hadn't changed. Her face remained poised and inscrutable, but the slight flattening of her ears told a more complex story. Kai didn't know the subtle language of long ears yet, but instinct told him it was not an unfriendly gesture, just one of curiosity mixed with mild exasperation. "You're the most beautiful one here," he blurted, the words tumbling out before his brain could intervene. There was a pause, a real, meaningful pause. Lyra's head tilted fractionally, the gesture subtle enough that only someone obsessively attentive would notice. Her lips, perfectly shaped but carefully restrained, quirked at one corner in what might have been amusement or a warning. The long ears twitched once more. "You really think so?" she asked, her voice smooth but measured, with an accent that suggested countless light years of travel and countless more layers of caution. I mean, I wasn't trying to start an interstellar incident, It's true," Kai stammered, swiping at his hair, which had rebelled in the chaos. "Seriously, you stand out. Even among, alien traders and holographic banners and apparently aggressive hovercarts. He stopped, realizing he sounded like a malfunctioning sales bot. Lyra raised an eyebrow, or at least something very close to the human equivalent of an eyebrow, considering her ears were doing most of the expressive work, and tilted her head again, this time letting a hint of amusement escape her otherwise disciplined posture. Kai tried to recover, hopping onto a nearby platform to avoid a small hovering crate that had decided to explore the corridor midair. "I'm Kai," he said, offering a hand in a gesture he hoped was diplomatically neutral. The crate, apparently unimpressed by his introduction, drifted lazily into a wall. "Lyra," she replied, accepting neither hand nor apology, but her ears twitched forward just enough to suggest recognition. She glanced around the corridor, her eyes scanning the crowd of aliens, humans, and indistinct life forms, all moving past with varying levels of disinterest or curiosity. Kai followed her glance and noticed that a few nearby traders were whispering among themselves, likely speculating about the audacity of a human complimenting a member of Lyra's species. He swallowed nervously, realizing that in a galaxy obsessed with reputation, even an innocent remark could be catastrophic. But he reminded himself he had two options: freeze or continue bumbling forward. He chose the latter naturally. "So, do you come to these stations often?" he asked, immediately cringing at the cliché but unable to stop himself. He jabbed a thumb at himself as if pointing out his own social inadequacy. Lyra's lips curved into a more noticeable smile and her ears twitched upward in amusement. Occasionally, I prefer quieter corridors, fewer drones, less chaotic humans. Right, quieter corridors, fewer drones, Kai muttered, pretending to take notes in the air, earning a stifled laugh from Lyra. His own nervousness, he realized, was starting to manifest as unintentional humor, a kind of accidental charm that seemed to intrigue her more than his words. The conversation was interrupted by a minor commotion. A rogue service drone had tipped over a stack of holographic crates, sending virtual fruits and blinking tech components bouncing across the corridor. Kai, without thinking, jumped in to help, only to slip on a luminous banana hologram, twisting in a way that defied both physics and dignity. Lyra stepped forward gracefully, catching him under the arm before he could completely collapse into a puddle of embarrassment. "Careful," she said, a playful note creeping into her voice. "I may admire humans, but I do not enjoy rescuing them from themselves." "I appreciate it," Kai said, brushing off the near disaster. "I have a knack for surviving, sometimes." He gave her a lopsided grin, which she regarded with that precise, measured curiosity that made him feel simultaneously evaluated and interesting. They moved together through the corridor, Kai staggering slightly while Lyra glided effortlessly, their shadows stretching across the metallic walls lined with pulsing conduit lights. He noticed her long ears again, how they moved subtly in reaction to his presence and the chaos around them, a language he had yet to decode. He wondered if every twitch carried meaning, or if it was just instinct. They rounded a corner and entered a small atrium filled with artificial gardens and floating luminescent fish. The scene seemed almost absurdly peaceful given the corridor chaos they had just escaped. Kai looked around, inhaling what smelled vaguely like ionized water and synthetic blossoms. "Not many humans come here," Lyra said, tilting her head. "You're either very brave or very foolish." Kai laughed a little too loudly, nearly startling a hovering plant into motion. "I'm aiming for brave. I think I overshot by about 70%. Lyra's ears twitched again, and she shook her head slightly, amusement clear now. "You certainly have a way of making first impressions memorable." Kai felt a small, satisfying warmth at her words. For once, he was not being judged solely for competence or diplomatic skill. He was being seen as human, chaotic, and genuinely sincere. And Lyra, for all her elegance and mysterious aura, was engaging with that human messiness in a way that suggested curiosity, maybe even something warmer. As they wandered among the artificial streams and hovering lights, Kai realized that this encounter was only the beginning. Something about Lyra had triggered more than admiration. It had sparked intrigue, a sense of playful challenge. And for the first time in months of navigating political negotiations, alien protocols, and robotic hazards, he felt a flicker of excitement that had nothing to do with official duty and everything to do with the unpredictable, long-eared alien walking beside him. A nearby service droid tripped over its own appendage and tumbled into the stream, squealing apologies in a high-pitched tone. Kai winced. "Well, at least we're consistent," he muttered. Lyra's quiet laughter echoed, the sound like a gentle ripple against the humming walls. He noticed her ears twitching forward in genuine amusement, a gesture he was beginning to interpret as approval, or at least intrigue. Kai knew then that the galaxy was vast, full of peril and absurdity in equal measure. But for this moment, in this strange atrium of floating light and artificial flora, he had made a connection. A human connection with an alien who defied expectation, whose long ears spoke volumes he could not yet understand, and whose presence made the chaos of Virelia Prime feel less threatening and more entertaining. And as Lyra glanced at him, eyes glinting with subtle mischief, Kai could not resist the urge to mutter under his breath, "You really are the most beautiful one here," hoping she would not take offense, hoping she would somehow laugh. She did, and that laugh, bright, unexpected, and carrying just the faintest hint of challenge, promised that this was the start of something neither of them would forget. Kai woke to the low hum of Virelia Prime's artificial atmosphere, feeling like the universe had chosen him as the protagonist of a cosmic sitcom. He blinked at the soft glow of the corridor lights, remembering Lyra and the absurd zero-gravity chaos of the atrium from the previous day. Somehow, he had survived multiple near falls, rogue drones, and what he could only describe as a brief, unintended interaction with a holographic banana. Somehow, too, he had made Lyra laugh. That seemed dangerous. Laughter had a way of opening people up, and opening people up in the middle of an alien station often led to unforeseen consequences. By the time Kai managed to navigate past a fleet of hover cleaners, and a particularly enthusiastic mechanical pet chasing its own tail, Lyra was already waiting. She stood near a floating cafe module, the light from the translucent ceiling reflecting off her golden eyes in a way that made Kai's stomach twist with nervous excitement. She looked serene, almost impossibly composed, her long ears moving subtly as if tuning to frequencies he could not hear. "Morning," he said, attempting casualness but failing spectacularly when a floating coffee mug drifted into him mid-greeting, spilling a faintly iridescent liquid over his shoulder. Lyra's lips curved in the tiniest smirk and her ears twitched forward. "You've chosen your timing well," she said, voice even but edged with amusement. "Coffee is optional. Coordination apparently is not." Kai wiped at his shirt, grimacing. "Coordination is overrated. I'm focusing on dramatic effect." He managed a wink that probably looked more like a seizure. Lyra did not comment, but her eyes flicked toward the service droid hovering nearby, which beeped in what sounded like sympathy. "Are you going to join me or continue demonstrating your unique approach to human locomotion?" Lyra asked. Kai hesitated, then stepped onto the floating platform leading to the cafe. "I think I'm ready for Phase 2. Conversational diplomacy, with a side of zero-gravity acrobatics." Lyra tilted her head, ears flicking in amusement. "We'll see." The cafe module shifted slightly in low gravity, and Kai immediately flailed, arms windmilling as he attempted to maintain balance. Lyra, moving with the precision of someone trained to navigate both physical and social complexities, grabbed his elbow at just the right angle to prevent him from colliding with a hovering teapot. "Not bad," she said lightly, releasing him. "You may yet survive your first week." Kai gave a mock salute, nearly spinning off the edge of the platform in the process. "I accept that as high praise." They floated together, finding a spot near the atrium where the artificial trees glowed faintly blue, and the fish swam through the air like liquid light. Kai's mind, despite the previous disasters, felt unusually sharp. Somehow, Lyra's presence forced him to focus, forced him to pay attention to details he usually overlooked. The subtle twitch of an ear, the gentle hum of a conduit, the precise moment when a drone passed too close to a holographic banner. "So," he said, trying to sound casual while simultaneously wondering how she managed to move so effortlessly through every corridor, "do you ever get tired of all this spectacle?" He gestured vaguely to the floating lights, the drones, the ever-shifting crowd. Lyra's gaze swept over the atrium, thoughtful. "Sometimes, but then chaos is what keeps things interesting. Besides, it's not often I encounter a human who isn't completely predictable." Kai froze for a moment, considering how to respond without sounding like a sycophant. "I prefer to think of it as unpredictably charming," he said, realizing mid-sentence that it might sound worse than intended. Her ears twitched again, and the corners of her lips lifted in a smile that made Kai feel he had passed some invisible test. "Unpredictable can be entertaining," she replied. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. A red light pulsed, and a robotic voice announced a minor security breach in the adjacent corridor. The station's AI identified it as a rogue transport drone that had malfunctioned, carrying sensitive cargo. Kai panicked internally. Sensitive cargo sounded like an invitation to disaster, and he had a tendency to convert disaster into full-blown comedy. Lyra, however, remained calm, her long ears tilting forward slightly as if focusing on the incoming situation. "Stay close," she said simply, and before Kai could object, she propelled herself toward the disturbance, leaving him to flail into the zero-gravity corridor behind her. The rogue drone, an angular metallic thing with blinking sensors and a high-pitched warning siren, zipped past them. Kai, attempting to intercept it, slipped on a residual patch of graviton gel and accidentally bumped into a maintenance robot, sending it spinning into the drone's path. The collision was perfect. By accident, he had successfully trapped the rogue drone against the wall. Lyra paused mid-motion, then looked back at him. "Well, that worked," she said, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. Her ears twitched in approval, which, judging by her species, was almost as good as a verbal compliment. Kai gave a sheepish grin. "All part of my master plan," he said, then immediately realized he sounded like a cartoon villain. I mean pure luck." The drone, now immobilized but still buzzing indignantly, drew the attention of a nearby security droid, which approached to assess the situation. Kai gestured toward it, trying to appear useful. Lyra, however, simply stepped forward, her movements smooth and deliberate, and deactivated the rogue drone with a single gesture. Its blinking lights dimmed, and it floated inertly in the corridor. "Humans are resourceful in their own way," she said, almost conversationally, though usually in ways that involve more screaming than finesse. Kai laughed, leaning against a nearby conduit. "I'll take that as a compliment." Once the alarm cleared, they returned to the cafe module. Kai, still catching his breath, realized that every encounter with Lyra seemed to balance danger with humor. She moved through the station like a living instrument, precise, elegant, and entirely unpredictable, while he provided chaos, distraction, and occasional luck. Somehow it worked. "I have to ask," he said finally, sitting on a floating bench that rotated lazily in the atrium, "do your ears always do that?" He gestured vaguely at her long, quivering appendages. Lyra tilted her head, allowing her ears to flick in a pattern that seemed almost musical. "They react to stimuli, yes. To sound, emotion, curiosity, occasionally boredom. You've provided all of the above." Kai laughed heartily this time. "Well, I aim to please and occasionally confuse." Their conversation drifted into stories of their home worlds. Kai spoke of Earth with its chaotic weather, slow bureaucracies, and inexplicable cultural trends. Lyra described her home planet, a place of crystalline forests, luminescent rivers, and a society structured around subtle cues and complex etiquette. Every detail she revealed fascinated him. The way her species used ear movements to communicate subtle truths, the unspoken rituals of trust and observation, the humor that existed in even the most rigid ceremonies. "You make it sound almost human," Kai said, eyes wide. Lyra smiled, ears flicking forward in amusement. "Perhaps we are more alike than either of us would care to admit, or perhaps you are more adaptable than most humans. Either way, it is entertaining." A small hover drone, carrying a tray of glowing beverages, drifted too close and spun erratically, nearly tipping its contents onto Kai. He flailed, catching the tray with one hand and spilling some of the drink across the floor. Lyra laughed outright this time, the sound ringing clearly across the atrium. Kai froze, caught mid-spill, and realized that she was laughing not at him, but with him. "See," she said, a playful glint in her eyes, "even chaos has its charm." Kai grinned, wiping the glowing liquid from his sleeve. "Then I'm practically heroic." Lyra's ears twitched upward, a gesture that seemed to signal approval, curiosity, and just a touch of exasperation. Kai felt a strange, wonderful warmth at that signal. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, full of rogue drones, exploding hovercarts, and overly affectionate service robots. But somehow, with Lyra beside him, it felt manageable, even fun. And as the corridor lights pulsed and the atrium's holographic fish drifted lazily through the air, Kai realized that this partnership of chaos and precision, humor and elegance, had only just begun. Whatever the galaxy had in store next, he was ready, or at least ready enough to stumble spectacularly through it with the long-eared alien by his side. Kai had learned, over the past few days, that surviving Virlia Prime required three things: a healthy disregard for personal dignity, an uncanny sense of timing, and a willingness to accept that chaos could be a form of diplomacy. He was reminded of this truth the moment the station's emergency sirens blared, sending pulses of red light racing across the corridors and shaking the floating holographic banners. A rogue transport vessel had collided with the station's outer docking arm, releasing a cargo of experimental graviton crystals into the low-gravity corridors. Kai stumbled as a sudden burst of graviton energy sent him spinning, arms flailing. He landed, fortunately, on a cushion of semi-transparent energy gel left by a maintenance bot. Lyra, gliding effortlessly behind him, had her long ears flicking in a series of rapid, almost musical twitches that betrayed her focus. "Stay close," she instructed, her voice calm despite the flashing chaos. Close as in accidentally on purpose close, or as in just slightly less likely to get vaporized? Kai asked, twisting to avoid a floating crate. A graviton crystal ricocheted off the wall and nearly collided with him. Lyra's lips quirked. "Depends on your definition of close. Humans seem to have creative interpretations." Kai managed a lopsided grin, narrowly catching a small crystal that had fallen toward his head. "Then I'll aim for creatively close." The corridors had transformed into a bizarre, zero-gravity obstacle course. Gravitation fields fluctuated unpredictably, causing crates, droids, and even a few unwatched passengers to drift in strange patterns. Kai, with his natural clumsiness, inadvertently became the hero of the moment. Each stumble or misstep seemed to trigger a chain reaction. A floating crate bounced into the path of a rogue security bot, a graviton crystal collided with a control panel, and a pair of startled traders floated past in slow, flailing arcs. Each time, Lyra's sharp reflexes compensated for his errors, turning chaos into controlled containment. "You're making this more entertaining than it should be," she said, catching him mid-spin before he collided with a drifting hydroponic pod. Her ears twitched forward, a signal Kai had begun to interpret as genuine approval. "Entertaining is my specialty," he said, spinning a graviton crystal between his fingers, completely ignoring the very real danger. "I'll even take suggestions if you want me to make it more dramatic." Lyra shot him a sharp glance, though it softened into a smirk. "Let's survive first, then you can be dramatic." By the time they reached the docking bay, the source of the chaos became apparent. A rogue maintenance drone, overclocked by a minor software corruption, had attempted to stabilize the graviton crystals, but instead amplified the gravitational distortions. It was spinning in midair, sending pulses of energy in unpredictable arcs. Kai, attempting to assist, bumped into the drone, causing it to spin faster. Maybe I'm not helping," he asked nervously. Lyra's eyes glinted. "Not exactly. But your style is memorable." She moved with the fluid precision of a species trained for both diplomacy and survival, intercepting the drone and disengaging its overcharged graviton emitters with a single, graceful motion. Kai floated beside her, catching his breath. "Wow, so elegant, I clearly need lessons." Lyra's ears twitched, betraying amusement and perhaps a hint of exasperation. "Some lessons require practice, some require observation, and some require surviving near-death experiences with humans." Kai laughed despite himself. "Good to know I'm a multi-purpose learning tool." As the docking bay settled into normal gravitation and the remaining rogue crystals were secured, Lyra floated beside him. The chaos had passed, and for the first time, Kai noticed the subtle changes in himself. He was less frantic, more aware of surroundings, and, unexpectedly, capable of thinking clearly even under absurd pressure. Lyra had pushed him to adapt, to survive, and to embrace the unpredictable, and he realized he had grown because of it. "You handled yourself better than I expected," Lyra said quietly, her ears flicking forward in an almost shy gesture. Kai smirked. "Better than I expected, too. I didn't fall into any major energy rifts. I'd call that a personal victory." Lyra laughed softly, the sound a rare, musical cadence that made his chest tighten pleasantly. "You are unpredictable, yet effective." They drifted through the docking bay, moving past floating crates, hovering tools, and the occasional disgruntled droid, until they reached a quiet observation platform overlooking the station's sprawling cityscape. Below, the lights of Virlia Prime shimmered like liquid gems, and beyond, the black velvet of space stretched into infinity. Kai looked at Lyra. "You know, I came here expecting. Well, honestly, I didn't really know what to expect. But this meeting you, it's better than I imagined, even with all the chaos." Lyra's eyes softened. Her ears twitched once, then again, settling in a subtle signal of calm. Humans tend to underestimate themselves. I've observed it before, but rarely with someone who also embraces their mistakes. Kai laughed, thinking of the crates, the graviton crystals, and all the moments he had stumbled into heroism without intending to. "So I'm officially your favorite disaster." "You are memorable," Lyra corrected, tilting her head, "which in your case is preferable to being forgettable." Kai floated closer, the zero-gravity chamber allowing a casual intimacy that gravity often denied. "I'll take it," he said, "and maybe I can aim to be less forgettable in other ways too." Lyra regarded him silently for a moment, her golden eyes assessing, then finally allowed a small, unexpected gesture. A brief, light touch to his shoulder, her long ears flicking forward with a subtle flourish. It was not a kiss, not a declaration, but it was a signal, a human and alien understanding that connection had been made, trust established, and something new had begun. Kai smiled. "So what now?" Lyra glanced toward the observation window, where stars streaked as ships departed and arrived. "Now, we navigate this galaxy, one unpredictable corridor at a time, and perhaps learn from each other along the way." Kai laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet chamber. "I think I can manage that, as long as there's less crashing than today." Lyra tilted her head, a smirk tugging at her lips. "No guarantees." He grinned, feeling a sense of completion he hadn't expected. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, absurdity, and uncertainty, but for the first time he felt ready. He had learned to survive chaos, to trust his instincts, and to embrace the humor in disaster. And in Lyra, he had found someone who challenged him, inspired him, and even laughed at him in ways that made life brighter, even in the depths of space. A small hover drone zipped past, squealing in alarm at a floating tool, and Kai reached out instinctively, steadying it. Lyra's ears flicked forward in silent approval. "See, you are improving." "Improving," Kai echoed, floating beside her as the station lights shimmered below. "Then let's call it a partnership. Chaos and precision, human and long ears, surviving the galaxy together." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time her ears relaxed fully, settling like wings at rest. "Together," she agreed. And as the observation platform floated quietly above Virlia Prime, stars stretching infinitely beyond, the two of them, human and alien, chaotic and precise, looked out into the galaxy and knew that whatever adventures awaited, they had found a balance and a bond that neither had expected but both had earned. Kai laughed, Lyra smiled, and somewhere in the vastness of space, a small, improbable adventure concluded, not with a finale of grand explosions or heroic sacrifice, but with understanding, growth, and the gentle humor of shared survival.